This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. Matt Chandler, I had an awkward introduction to the first time we did an interview because I was in your house.
Yeah.
And so I didn't exactly know what to say because normally it's like, hey, welcome to Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. It's like, oh, yeah. It's kind of like informal. But now you're at my house.
That's right.
And so it's like,
home
now
field advantage.
I still don't know how to do my introduction because it's like, do I just say, welcome to my house, welcome to the forging table? Because we already kind of did that a little bit.
Forging tables.
Yeah. So spoiler alert for any of you guys listening to this, because we have actually recorded 4 forging tables over the last couple of days. You've been staying with us at the house. So what do you think about Oklahoma? What do you think about my crew?
Listen,
what do you think about my house? Like, come on, let's hit it.
So the crew, I think there are men that if you move towards them, they will lessen. And, or if you move towards them, you'll see, oh man, there's some legitimate consistency, integrity in their lives. And you are who you say you are. And so as I've
for better or worse,
all of it, all of it. So, your crew is solid. They love you, but they're not impressed with you. That's hugely important for a man. I've had a great time eating, unlike I would normally eat, and it's been amazing.
What'd you have for breakfast this morning?
Banana pudding.
As you guys have probably heard me talk about, my favorite thing, so my wife and I, every now and then we'll get into these Q&A type things, and we got these sets of cards where it's like date night cards, and you kind of go through. And she doesn't think about macabre things like what's the last meal I would eat on earth if I was about to be executed. She just doesn't have a category for that. And I'm like, oh, I've already thought through this entirely. But I'm like, if I get one dish, so people think about last meal and they're doing appetizers, they're doing all kinds of desserts and entrees and all that. I'm like, okay, if I get one dish, I'm dying today. Is my wife's banana pudding.
Kel's killed it.
Okay. And so but that's the jam for her. And that she's not really big in the kitchen and she doesn't really care about all that, but that's the one thing that she absolutely, absolutely nails. But the cool thing about it, and we were talking about this a little bit, is me to a much lesser degree than you get offered to do some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
And you can just do that stuff solo.
Yeah.
You can just, go to the event or do the thing or meet the person and all that. But I've found that it's pretty awesome when you can bring some of your boys or bring your family, bring your wife into the fold a little bit and be like, okay, dad's got kind of a unique job. Yeah. I have a 4-year-old and 2-year-old, so they barely know the difference between anything. But it's like, okay, I got kind of a unique job. I get to do some cool opportunities. But as opposed to okay, Matt, you're coming to the house to record and do jiu-jitsu and all that kind of stuff, and I'm just going to keep you to myself. Monday, I'm like, we're just going to have a cookout. I'm going to do smash burgers. Let's make some Oryx smash burgers. So I'll be busy at the Blackstone. And then my guys that have listened to you forever, you just get to chill and hang. Yeah. And it's not this formal meeting line. Here, sign my book. Can I take a picture, please? This just a cool chill experience.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And so I guess for you, when you come and do stuff, do you do stuff like this very often where you just because you're in a unique spot right now because you're on sabbatical.
That's right.
And so what's the difference between Matt right now on sabbatical and Matt just normal everyday life trying to get through the week?
Well, June's a little bit different for me. The sabbatical's the entire summer, but I think my guys know me well enough to know he can't go a million miles an hour and then just stop.
Right.
And so I'm preaching through the book of Jonah this June at the Village as a way of easing into sabbatical. And then I'm using the weeks, honestly, I've got there's some things I'm working on this summer just internally for my own self. I tend to still trying to conquer in a way, and maybe that's the wrong word, my frenetic energy that I'm always humming with. I would like to grow in greater stillness internally, if that's possible, at least find where we can go with that. And then I want to train jiu-jitsu really hard this summer. I don't have space to train really hard when life is what it should be for me in this season of my life with the places God's put me.
Okay, we'll get back to the training piece, but I want to go back to what you mentioned about the frenetic energy.
Yeah.
So when people say your greatest strength is your greatest weakness, your greatest blessing is your greatest curse, sometimes I feel that way about my frenetic energy and my competitiveness and my just forthrightness and no, this has to be done now and it has to be done perfectly, that type of thing. But for me, I see that as a net benefit that I don't want to chill out.
Yeah.
For me, I guess it's I have to be selective who gets to see that.
Yeah.
Because like the boys don't need to see, frenetic, competitive guy all the time. Like they need to see, compassion and love and empathy, but also drive and all that. Same thing with like wife and different things. So like, are you saying that you've seen like some negativity come from your frenetic energy?
All the mistakes I make are speed-based accidents. So I'm curious as if I could just slow down a hair. I even had my neurologist tell me, they won't ever put me on medicine. He's just like, look, there's something about your wildness that the organizations you lead need. There's a way God built you, and I don't ever want to damper that. So I might throw 5 pills your way for when you're in a spreadsheet meeting that's lasting 9 hours, but I'm not putting you on meds because there's something about this wildness that's good. But the mistakes I make, the missteps, they're always speed related. They're always, I'm moving too fast. I'm not thinking too clearly. I'm doing too many things at once. And had I slowed down, if I'd slowed down just a little bit, probably could have seen, I need to start making the left turn now, not in the intersection and smash into something else. And so that's more what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to lessen my energy as much as I'm trying to internally catch up to myself, if that makes sense.
Well, let me actually, I do want to drill down to bedrock on this, because this is something that this is my everyday as well.
Yeah.
But I don't have an organization, right? I'm more of like a lone wolf. And so I can be really nimble. So are you saying a lot of the speed stuff, it comes on, is this an interpersonal thing or a business thing? Is this as I'm prepping a sermon, I'll listen to it back and be like, oh my gosh, I left out an entire chunk that would have made this better.
I think it flares everywhere.
Okay.
It flares in every area of my life. Parenting, marriage, leadership, preaching. I'm just moving so fast internally. And that means I miss things externally. And I'm curious if even I'm missing things internally also because of how frenetic I am. Like I've learned, and Lauren's been so great for me in this, that I'm so future oriented that if I don't create space after a loss to mourn that loss, then I'll hardly ever think about it again until all of that piles up in my soul. And next thing you know, I'm just pissed at the world and don't know why.
Do you celebrate wins?
Oh, I've learned to celebrate wins. So we do,
because I don't do
celebrate wins.
The morning, and I don't do the celebration of wins, because I'll accomplish the thing and then I just got to move on to the next thing.
Well, this was my crew, so like my little King's table with me, we learned this several years ago that we just run into the next fight. We just run into the next fight. We never pause and celebrate that all of our prayers and all of our works, God moved in that. And so we've learned now we're gonna stop and celebrate when it's time to stop and celebrate. And really now I'm much better at that, but I still won't, I need to create space to mourn, and or that stuff just piles up in me, and then next thing I know it, I'm really pissed at the world, and I'm not quite sure why I'm pissed at the world.
Okay, so when you're talking about mourning, some people, it's like, okay, someone I love died, mourning. My dog, best friend, dies, mourning. Are you talking like just mourning in that category of that's kind of like extreme mourning, or just even mourning like this didn't go the way I wanted it to go? Hey, I missed the mark here.
No, I think to stop and feel that versus refuse to feel that and just move on to the next thing. And so as human beings, even psychologically speaking, like that's going somewhere. You're doing something with that disappointment, and you can theologize it if you want, which, a lot of people do, a lot of Christians do, or you can sit in it for a second. I'm not advocating, sackcloth and ashes for, 6 weeks because, the barista got your coffee wrong. That's not what I'm talking about here. But significant disappointments, significant betrayals, because I've been betrayed, but just like F that guy, and then just kept going. But that was a friend who I trusted who betrayed me. And then a year later, I haven't thought of him.
Yeah.
I haven't thought, but I'm much more skeptical of people now.
Right.
I'm dang sure not going to let anybody else in like that again, which is the wrong play. and so that's the stuff I want to kind of stop and bring to the Lord and just acknowledge, hey, that kind of sucks. Or even family dynamic stuff.
Okay, so are you more optimistic or pessimistic by nature?
Optimistic.
Okay, so this will be a lot better since you are default that. So I'm default pessimistic. So like this
really?
guy, yeah, it's just shock. Like no,
Wait,
like everyone's absolutely blown away.
Everything I believe about you just shifted.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, you're welcome.
Just clicked.
This is going to be a more accurate picture that you're going to be getting of me. So obviously I'm default negative, I'm default aggressive, default abrasive, like all these like things. But also, and I've talked to buddies of mine that, are professional counselors and people that are just like smart, wisdom-filled individuals. And, I'll say one. So my buddy Donnie, he's a licensed family therapist and he's the leader of our Sunday school, and you got to meet him on Monday, and he's just great dude. And so we're on the back porch, his back porch, having a cigar, months ago, and Ryan Horner was there, the Horn. And we're chilling, and Donnie's trying to make a point. And the example he says, he's like, Kyle, when you walk into a jiu-jitsu tournament, do you just assume that you're going to lose every match? And I go, yes. And he's like, no, you don't. I'm like, I absolutely do. I'm like, I assume that not only am I going to get beaten, that I'm going to get passed out unconscious, and that he's going to carry my lifeless body and drop it in front of my weeping wife. That's what I assume is going to be happening. And he's like, how? Like, I'm like, because I fuel on negativity. Okay. Like I use it as fuel. Because in order to avoid that scenario, lifeless body in front of my weeping wife, I'm going to train like a lunatic.
Yep.
The problem is there's another side. So I train well, and then I compete well because I compete with this fear of like that happening. Yeah. The only problem is like if I do lose, like it's fine. Like I'll lose, but I will never not think about that loss. Yeah. Like I can remember balls that I dropped in intramural football. Yeah. Right? That should have been touchdowns that I just dropped, and it's just like, oh. But it drives me when I'm practicing to like focus on the basics. Like don't get out of your head, like kind of do all that. And a lot of people are like, Kyle, that's horrible. You can't fuel negativity. I'm like, interesting. I've been doing it my entire life and it's working out pretty well. And the thing is like, I don't think that this ends somewhere badly. I just think that there's things broken in my like wiring to where it's like most people are carrot and I'm stick, but no one else has to provide the stick. Yeah. Like no one's ever going to be more critical of me than I am. So your angry email or your angry comment on Instagram, interesting. It's not nearly as bad as my internal dialogue. Yeah. And so it's like for somebody that's not wired like that, for somebody that's like way more normal, like, do you see issues there? Because I'm a speed guy as well. Yeah. But my thing is like when I make a mistake, I'm destroying myself for it so that I don't make that mistake again. Yeah. And I know that's not like the greatest thing you can say it out loud.
I'd be curious about where these dynamics intersect in your relationship with the Lord. I mean, how does this, if you're bent to the negative, is there and I'm not trying to interview you here, but
I'll answer you.
Is there a sense in which your relationship with the Lord is built upon not a holy fear, but that same kind of, are you bringing that same kind of negativity into your relationship with the Lord? So you're going into a jiu-jitsu and you're just like, I'm going to get killed. Is your relationship with the Lord like, I'm going to get rejected, or he's going to change his mind about me, or he's not going to be enough on the day of trouble, so let me build my life in such a way that if he doesn't come through, then my body doesn't get thrown weeping in front of my wife?
Right. So that's a good question. So when I was, last time I was hanging out with John Cooper, lead singer of Skill, a great dude. I asked him about this process of delayed sanctification. And what I meant by that is, so I don't grow up in church. I don't do Awana or Sunday school or, VBS. And then, I become a Christian when I'm 15. And then I basically start this process of just trying to figure it out on my own. Didn't have someone discipling me, didn't have a mentor, didn't have anyone in my own home that I could turn to ask questions. And so it's like, well, I've been figuring things out my entire life. Yeah. I guess I'll just figure this out too. But I feel like really it wasn't until these last several years, the forging table being one of those big things, that I feel like I'm actually experiencing significant levels of sanctification now. Yeah. Because everything's performance-based for me. Like as a kid, I would be grounded if I got B's, but it was because they knew I was capable of A's.
Yeah.
But when I got a B in AP chemistry, didn't get grounded because it's like, that's the best I could do.
Yeah.
I never got in trouble for going 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts and 2 errors in the field. I got in trouble if I didn't run out, run to my position, if I didn't hustle, if I didn't that's what I got in trouble for. So I did kind of grow up in a performance-based environment where my worth was dependent upon how I performed, but it was all kind of effort driven.
Yeah.
And so my thing is like, I may not beat you, but I'm going to out effort you. Yeah. And it's like, same thing in jiu-jitsu. It's like, if we get into a scramble, you may end up in a better position than me, but you're going to be more tired than I am. But I will say, in terms of like my relationship with the Lord, the one thing where where leaning into my negativity is a bad thing is when I'm in a bad mood, or when I'm angry, or when something has not gone my way, or when I'm, going into, in the middle of, or coming out of the valley of the shadow of death, I don't run to the book.
Yeah.
Right. And I've heard Joby talk about that. It's like, hey, what happens when things are going wrong? Do you run to the Lord, or do you run away from him?
Yeah.
So I don't run to the book. I listen to the most angry, vile music ever that helps me kind of lean into my anger, just so I can get to the end of it. Okay, let's exhaust this anger, and so that we can move on and kind of be semi-normal. And so I feel very comfortable in my understanding that, okay, I'm in the elect if you're a Calvinist, right? So I made the team before time. That's great. Or I just I'm very aware that, look, I've put my faith in Christ, not in my personal ability to be righteous. So I feel good about that, but it's more so that's where my negativity kind of manifests in terms of where I'm following the Lord, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Have you ever been so angry that you couldn't get to the other side of it?
No, but it's interesting what you brought up earlier about when a guy has wronged you or betrayed you or something like that. I'm a very emotionless recategorizer. Okay. What I mean by that is I had a guy, one guy comes to mind that violated me and violated the trust that we had gained, violated our friendship, and he did it for very selfish reasons. And the thing about this guy is he came to me almost immediately whenever I found out. He admitted, look, I misled you. I lied to you. I betrayed you. I'm sorry. I hope you can forgive me. And I go, okay, yeah, I forgive you. But you're in a different category now, right? He goes, I know.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I tell that with stories like that with my wife, and I'm so emotionless about it, she's terrified.
Yeah.
She's like, is he going to be like that with me someday? Is he going to be like that with the son someday? But the way I explained it to her, same thing, the best man in my wedding, and I was the best man in his wedding. We haven't talked in a couple of years. Oh, when the one time we did talk, it was not a fun conversation. Yeah. We've kind of gone in different directions. He's pursued things that I don't think are good, and I pursued things that he doesn't think are worthwhile. And so there wasn't a big dramatic breakup. We just kind of move in opposite directions. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is so sad. I'm like, babe, there's 8 billion people on the planet. Not all of them are going to be at our funerals. You know what I mean? You don't, if the guys you're hanging out with right now are at your funeral or you're at their funeral, that is a tremendous blessing, but you can't assume that that's going to happen. Yeah. So that's kind of where my mindset goes. And it seems a little bit macabre and a little bit aggressive to do that. But that's just how my brain works. It just kind of works for me that.
All right. Yeah, maybe you can live in and through that. I'm curious if it'll be a fun decade for me to watch you kind of continue to mature and grow in the Lord, to see if those are spaces he wants to work and chooses to work in you, and how that process goes. So
with that in mind, so if you were molding, if you were maestroing a situation like that, because I'm not so naive as to think that there's not some holes in my way of operating. I'm certainly not thinking that I've got it figured out, but it's it's easy to identify potential future pitfalls for other people.
Sure.
That's what I encourage dads with sons to do. It's call out the things in your son that are righteous, that God put there, give a name to it so that they can see it and recognize it, but also call out the things look, son, you're pretty impetuous, or look, son, man, you can be really aloof, and that really, you're going to get taken advantage of, that kind of thing. So knowing what you know, where do you see those pitfalls?
And that's where I'm hesitant, because I don't know you all that well, and I've just spent my first few days with you that weren't hurried or rushed, or it's the first time I've gotten to see you with your crew and your kids and your wife and then even then, I don't know how much of what I've seen is Camelot and how much I've seen is legit.
I don't show off a lot of Camelot. I'll be real honest. It just kind of is what it is.
So I do wonder, like, almost all the high capacity, super driven, gonna kick the world in the ass guys I know have a lot of defense mechanisms that they learned early in life. And you've already alluded to the major one, which is there wasn't anybody here. I had to figure it out.
Right.
And so, like, almost every high capacity, super accomplished, whether they're optimistic in their thinking or no future in their thinking or past in their thinking, I don't know too many high capacity leaders that are past oriented because they would get crushed by everything back there.
Can't move.
Yeah, most of them are future oriented. Like most of us, we have your story. We were thrown into the deep end of the pool and we just survived. And so we figured out how to make our own way and we figured out but for me, late 30s, that stopped working. And then I was just resenting everyone for making me figure it out, even when no one was asking me to figure it out anymore. And so I don't know how much of that's in you or not in you, Kyle, but that will be something the Lord shows up for in your late 30s. If you can, even with his name, with a pure heart, be trying to control your world through some of the things that we've already said out loud here, where he's going to want to soften and heal those places without taking the edge from you necessarily. Like I've been on this journey for almost a decade and I feel like I'm preaching as aggressively as I ever have. So
especially
it's not like that edge got taken from me. It is like it got refined. And then I've come into a more full version of myself. And he's still working. I mean, he's certainly not done. I'm here. I'm still alive. So he's still working, right? He'll carry it on to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. So until then, works in progress. So I don't know you well enough I don't know your backstory well enough. I just have I've got little Polaroids of your life up until this point. I don't experience you as unhealthy. I mean, violent. I've experienced you as violent. I've had your knee in my belly like 40 times. None of that was fun. I think you broke my toe yesterday, but it
looks good.
Yeah. If purple's your favorite color,
it's a good one.
Purple and black is your
color
favorite
royalty.
Color. That's right.
So I gave you royalty. I gave you your kingship.
Thank you.
Well, okay. So I definitely want to get back to jiu-jitsu, but so you mentioned the King's Table. You mentioned that a lot. I think you mentioned it on Forging Table episodes. I always talk about in terms of like a foxhole, but it is an important thing to have dudes that are not in awe of you.
No question.
And dudes that know you at your worst moments, but also guys that kind of understand how you tick.
That's
and so
right.
like, I am under no illusions that I am an easy person to be around. Right. And so like, I even tell my friends, so like my friends that don't train jiu-jitsu, they're like, Kyle, I know you think it would be a good idea if I trained jiu-jitsu. And I'm like,
wait, what?
Well, let me tell you a new argument I came up with. And so like, I require a lot of things of the people that are around me, not for my benefit, but for theirs.
Yeah. You see what they could be.
Right. And so like, the Forging Table guys. And so I said, hey, by the end of the year, by New Year's Eve, 2024, all of you need to be able to do 10 push-ups or 10 pull-ups.
Yeah.
And some of them were like, I don't know that I've ever done a pull-up. I was like, well, you have 7 months like to figure that out. Like you can do anything in 7 months. And so you can see some of the guys were like, yeah, that's weird. I don't know if I want to do that. And other guys were like, okay, well, I wonder how I could make that happen. And so it's like, I'm trying to call them up into something because it's not about the pull-ups.
Yeah.
It's about the process of doing something that's so deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because if you have too much weight on your body, it's going to be hard to pull your chin up and over a bar. And some people are like, why would I need to do a chin up? It's like, well, if you need to get your body up and over a wall in order to save your life or the lives of one of your family members or something like that, and you're incapable of doing so,
that's a problem.
would you rather be sitting at the bottom of the wall dead, or would you rather be on the other side being alive? And so I know that I can be a lot. And like, you pray for my wife. I mean, she has been with me for like since 2009 or 2005. And like, it can be a whole lot, but it's like, I want so much for other people. Yeah. And I think part of that is because driver. I'm 5'10", I'm 185 pounds now. I'm, right around 190, whatever. I stopped growing at 5'10" in high school. And so it's like, all right, I guess the major leagues aren't going to be, in my future or things like that. But I would see guys that had the height, that had the athletic ability, that had the speed, they just didn't care.
Yeah.
Everything came so easy to them, so they didn't work hard, so they didn't try. And I just remember being like, God, if I had what you had with the drive that I have, like I would be something more special or something better. Or it could be, you know, the family, like, gosh, if my family had money like that, then we could have these fun things. Or it's always been that I want you to like squeeze out every last bit. And I feel like everyone in the world is fine to settle. Yeah. They're fine to just watch television and watch porn and to just like kind of amoeba their way through life. And I can't have a bunch of those slugs around me. Yeah. Like it's like it weighs on me.
Well, what was I'm sure you've seen it. There was some sort of research that came out in the last year that basically said you're going to be like your 5 closest friends.
Right. The same colloquialism actually was true.
Yeah. Right. Like they've like, you take somebody out of this unit, you put them into this unit, they're going to become like this unit. They're going to think like them. They're going to dress like them. They're going to live like them. And so it's a true thing, which this is a funny conversation. I don't know everybody's name because I met like 40 people Monday night.
Yeah, right.
So
we should have name tags.
There's guys talking about this pull-up thing that you're making them do. And they're just kind of joking around. And then one guy, I'm guessing he was just like, you know, you don't have to do what he tells you. He's not your dad.
Right.
I just thought it was such a great comment. Yeah. I was thinking it, but they were like, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm like at 2 and I probably need to drop another 15, 20 pounds if I'm going to get much more than that. And they're just like, well, when are you doing? I don't know. I'm just trying to squeeze it. And this other guy was just like, hey guys, you don't have to do what he tells you to do.
Right. And I would say the same thing.
You don't have
to. Yeah.
But they were talking like they were some sort of papal edict that came down and they were going to be good Catholics. They had better do it.
What's funny is, so Ryan Horn's wife said that pretty early on. Cause like I would like challenge him to do certain things here or there. And she'd be like, you know, you don't have to do these things. And he's like, I know that, but I feel like I have to, like, I feel like I do because again, I try to call someone up into that bigger thing. But here's the thing about those guys, like your Foxhole guys, your King's Table guys. Those are the guys that, you know, are willing to put relational chips in the middle of the table and risk hurting your feels, right? And what I tell people all the time is like, you need guys around you that are willing to take a punch from you in the face. Cause that is the worst case scenario of when you call one of your brothers out. Hey, you need to stop doing that. Hey, you need to start doing this. Hey, you're not going to talk to your wife that way. Hey, I saw how you handled your kids. That was very heavy-handed in a very light situation. But so many guys have none of those people. And some guys are either unaware of that or they lament the fact but aren't willing to do anything about it. Yeah. Because they just want to sit down and watch Netflix. They just want to play video games. They just want to do another fantasy football draft. And then they lament that they don't have any guys that they can depend on. But it's
that fantasy football draft, here's my 30 years of trying to walk with men, that fantasy football draft, probably because I'm not trying to psychologicalize this. That's not even a word. But
it sounded good.
If I just would have kept going.
You could. I mean, people. It's like when you're reading Old Testament names. Yeah, when you're reading Old Testament names, just blur right through it.
Yeah, I think guys will look at the fantasy football draft as like, yeah, these are my guys, man. But then it ain't going to work in the day of war. I can tell you that. When it really comes down around you, it's not your fantasy football guys probably that are going to be the guys that the 3 a.m. friend as you went viral on. But so I think there's a development of the table, whether it's the forging table, your guys, or I call mine the King's Table, and then we got shield to shield, which is some language we've co-opted from Gates of Fire. But this is the stuff we're talking about, wanting to finish well, wanting to manage our lives to the glory of God. And then we do so much of that stuff together now. We were working on these, we just call them briefcases for what would, if something were to happen to us, would our wives would they be set up well?
Yeah.
And would they know where the passwords are? Would they know, where the money was? Would they know
where the life insurance policies?
Would they know who to? And so one of the things we all did is we just worked it out together where we created these little briefcases. If anything were to ever happen to me, there would be something Andrea, who's my assistant, hands to Lauren, and it's everything. It's every password. It's where every dollar is. It's who she needs to call for this. It's who will take care of this. And it just is like just a thought. And that, I mean, whether you do that exercise or not, I don't care. I'm saying this is the kind of stuff we're doing together. on top of the cigar or bourbon or fire pit, or there'll be these things we're working on together. It's not uncommon for me to get text from those guys every day with a screen grab of their workout or, their heart rate monitor or what they did that day. So it's that kind of, we want to make each other the best version of ourselves possible. And we're all different in where you need to press or not press. And there's some guys you wouldn't want to press there. You want to press over here. And then there's some guys that you don't, one guy in particular, he's he's going to charge whatever hill that's in front of him, regardless. He hardly needs any motivation to do that at all. You kind of remind me a little bit of him, but he's just older. And so those are things I'm trying to do with my guys. And most guys, you're not going to fall into the kind of relationships we're talking about here. They're developed. And so there has to be I'm looking for this. Are you looking for this? Then let's do it. And is there someone else we need to bring in on this?
Hey guys, real quick. Here recently, one of my family members was telling me about how they partnered with another family and they bought some beef from this local cattle producer. And when they got the beef, it was unbelievably terrible. And I can tell you this from experience because they made me some beef ribs from that animal and they were terrible. And they even gave me some steaks and some ground and it was basically inedible. I couldn't believe how bad it was. And they ended up finding out that the person killed an old bull or something like that, and just the meat was old and tough and awful. And that's just what happens when you don't have a quality cattle operation that you can trust to give you a quality beef product on the back end. And that's, guys, why I want to introduce you to the official beef delivery partner of Undaunted.Life, my friends at Primal Beef. So Primal Beef is a cattle operation owned and operated by Sean Glass. He's a retired Navy SEAL that has partnered with Jocko Willing to launch Primal Beef. So what makes Primal Beef different from some of these other cattle operations where you're going to end up getting bad beef? This operation is all American Black Angus cattle. The beef comes from one farm, and that's in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. The beef is all natural, no hormones ever, no mRNA ever, no vaccines ever. And after slaughter, this is a big deal. The beef is dry aged, and then it's hand cut by artisan butchers and then flash frozen to ensure that it maintains tenderness, marbling, and flavor. And here's another great thing about it. For every box sold, Primal Beef donates meat directly to a member of America's Special Operations Forces through the C4 Foundation. So you can take pride knowing that your purchase will help to put literal food on the table for America's finest warriors. If you're not salivating yet, it's probably because you're a communist. Don't be a communist. Try Primal Beef out today by going to www.primalbeef.com. That's primalbeef.com. Use the promo code Kyle, that's my first name, to get 10% off of your order. The great thing about that promo code is you can stack that on other deals as well and get all this money off. Again, that's primalbeef.com, promo code Kyle, that's Kyle, to get 10% off your order. So let's talk about the development process a little bit more, because I'll get asked, okay, Kyle, I'm with you. Foxhole, I need somebody. Matt Chandler says, King's Table. Kyle, I want to create my King's Table. So immediately people want to get to the brass tacks of like, okay, well, what does that person consist of? And I've got this whole thing that I do in a speech that I go and give to men's groups and all that about what types of guys to look for, what types of qualities. But when you're thinking of a King's Table guy, what types of qualities does that person have? But also, now that they're in the club, as it were, or at the table, what are the things that you're doing to develop and deepen and further that relationship? Yeah.
So a big deal for me is proximity.
Right.
Like if I see you once a month,
you're not consequential.
It's not going to happen.
No.
It's not. I need eyes on me and eyes on me and my family and eyes on, like if I need to see you several times a week just in the natural flow of my life, so now if you're a truck driver, long haul truck driver, and you're listening to this, you're like, well, crap. So you would have to get creative on how to do this. But I'm looking for proximity. I'm looking for men who are serious about God's call on their life. I'm not looking for half-hearted guys. I'm looking for guys who are not afraid to have either vulnerable conversations or hard conversations. So one of the things that should be, if you're listening to this takes time. This is not like you just met a guy last week, so you're like, hey, bud, let me give you
the secret. Foxhole.
Let me give you the secrets of my soul.
Right.
That this, like my crew, like Josh 20, Trevor 15, Mason 15, Nick going on 3, the the bulk of that crew has been built over a long period of time through some significant lows and some significant highs. And war does something to guys. You know, I don't know if they're trauma bonds or what you want to call them, but we have been through stuff that has increased our trust in one another to a point where it's not, I wouldn't call it blind trust, but Josh Patterson's taken a bullet for me. And might be the guy that shoots me with one if I need it.
Yeah.
And so I just have no doubts about those guys, but it happened over a slow period of time where in the day of trouble, either theirs or mine, there was integrity kept and there was a moving towards that deepened the relationship. And so like the guys I'm talking about, these are guys that when I had cancer were driving me down to radiation some days of the week. I had to go every day, 45 minutes away. I couldn't drive. That, you know, we had 3 small kids. So Lauren's like, I don't know how I'm going to make this work. And the crew was like, we'll make it work. And so those guys were driving me down to radiation every day. They were, Josh in particular was at the hospital for the birth of all 3 of my children. I was at the hospital for the birth of all 4 of his. They helped me navigate some really difficult seasons in our home. We had about a 3-year, I think I referenced those in the last podcast. We had about a 3 or 4 year, just terrible run with some situations in our family. Again, not my testimony. And, I mean, they were just always there for it. When there have been high moments of celebration, they brought an expensive bottle of bourbon over and just knocked on the door and, you know, fire up the fire pit out back. We're going to celebrate tonight. And so it's just been those guys. And then there've been guys that have confronted me about things. They've just been like, hey, this is inconsistent. This is inconsistent in your life. I want to help you get better at this. And I've never enjoyed that, but enjoyed it. And I've had to reciprocate.
Yeah.
Like this is a weakness I see in you. I'd love to see you grow into. And so none of my guys, I need to do pull-ups. They're all pretty.
I mean, they probably should though.
Yeah.
Like,
I think I think they
probably make them a lot better.
They're all.
Maybe I'll tell them, and because we know the rules, if I say it,
right.
you have to do it.
That's
right?
what
you have to do what I say.
There's a guy out there telling people that.
I know the guy. It's fine. It's because he's not good at pull-ups. But like the thing that I find interesting about that, so proximity, that's the first thing I say to somebody. I got an email from someone the other day that's just like, hey man, I've got 2 guys that are in my Foxhole. I mean, I live in Tennessee and they live in Washington and Montana. I'm like, all right, dude, they're just not in your Foxhole. Like, because the thing is like you can have dudes that you love, like you were on the football team with them in high school, or you're in the same frat during college, or you know you went through police academy together, or you went through basic training together and all that, but they're not consequential to your life if they can't just be here later today.
Yeah.
Right. So if they've got to like take time off work, hop on a plane or hop in the truck or all that, and they'll be there within the next couple of days or something like that, you can love them. They can love you. You know, if they called you and said, hey, I need you here, you would make the same, plans to go see them. They're just not consequential to you. Proximity matters. But also there's a big key here. And, you know, for me, this is sometimes I do this well and sometimes I don't, is when that person risks relational capital with you and you reject them or stiff arm them. It's like, bro, you said you wanted accountability. You said you wanted Foxhole guys, that you wanted guys at your table, that you wanted this. And then they push back and you go, hey man, you don't know me.
Yeah.
You don't know what I'm about. Hey, you don't know what you're talking about there. And I've had moments where I just accepted rebuke from a friend, other times where I immediately went default abrasive, default aggressive, default fight. And, you know, you still try to find the times where, okay, I've invited this upon myself.
Yep.
And I'm rejecting it for a reason. It's probably ego driven. And I need to just kind of get over myself. Because you're right. It's never fun in the moment when you're getting rebuked or nudged or moved and all that, because you've got to figure it out. You've got it going on and you're smart and they're not. And like, but then you get away from that a little bit. And then it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I've used this example before. So I know we get new listeners, you know, every week. And so if you've heard the story before, just grin and bear it. But there was a good buddy of mine, great wrestler, great jiu-jitsu guy, Christian, family man, business owner, like that guy, right? Well, we have some other mutual friends that are like MMA fighters and not necessarily Christians, pretty rough dudes. And so they all go out one night and they're at a bar, and my buddy and 3 of these guys that are rough, non-Christians, all that, they flip off the camera. And my buddy, throws up a couple of birds just like the rest of them. And here they are all being, we're bad and we're flipping off the camera. And I see him post that on Facebook, and I just call him. And I go, hey, bro, what's up with the picture that you just posted with? And I said the guy's name. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, flipping off the camera?
Yeah.
Is that your brand? Like, family man, Christian business owner, all that? Like, is that what we're doing now?
Yeah.
And he flips on me.
Yeah.
And it's like, Pharisee, call me out. Oh, you're going to call me out of the blue because I took a picture that you didn't like. Like, what's your problem? Like, take out this, the log in your eye, like that type of thing. And I just go, okay.
Yep.
You got anything else? Kind of a thing. And then that's where we left it. And so he then calls his dad and says, man, my buddy just called me and blah, blah. Can you believe this? And blah, blah. And his dad just goes, was your buddy right? He was just like, yeah, I guess he is right. So to his credit, he calls me, I think it was same day or next day, and says, hey man, I apologize for how I reacted to you. Like, I thought you were over the line for calling me out and blah, blah, blah. But you're right. Like, if some of my clients saw that picture, they probably wouldn't appreciate it. I'd probably lose them, which would affect my bottom line, which affects my ability to feed my family. And, if my wife saw that, or if my kid, when they grow up, if they saw that picture and they saw dad flipping off the camera with some MMA fighters, like, I don't think they would appreciate that very much. So I don't say a story like that to be like, gosh, I am so awesome and I'm so glad that I did that. But that was an example of a guy that could clearly whoop me. Yeah. Like, if you guys know who I'm talking about, this is a guy that could smash me to pieces if he wanted to. This is a guy that could beat me up. This was a guy that we had a business relationship at the time. So he could have crushed me in a lot of different ways. Yeah. But I didn't think about that because in that moment, I was worried about him. Yeah. And I was worried about how he was showing himself to the world. And I was worried about his witness. And he had a blind spot. Yeah. And it was incumbent upon me to point that out. But I just feel like we don't have enough guys that are willing to do that.
Yeah. Well, you don't have enough guys that understand relational dynamics to even understand the necessity of it. Like, there's no path to maturity for a man that doesn't have a brotherhood willing to make that call and then let you thrash around a little bit. And then hopefully, if the accusation's true, then humbly submit to the rebuke, because the rebuke ultimately, if it's true, is coming from the Lord.
Right.
It's coming from the Lord through a brother who obviously loves you. Unless he's just, everybody knows a guy or two that just is, they love conflict. Yeah, so they're always trying to, And so I'm not talking about that though. And I do think for guys that are listening, it's important to understand that there's a reason why they call them blind spots.
Right.
Like, of course you don't think it's an issue. Of course you don't see it. Of course you're not. Like, my guess is you're a good dude. If you saw it, you probably wouldn't be doing it. If you knew how it was being perceived or experienced, you probably would change, but you don't. And that's why it's so shocking when somebody's like, hey, this thing here, what are you talking about? I've been doing that thing for 20 years. Yeah. And this thing needs to go because here's what the scriptures say, and this is the kind of man God wants you to be.
And here's what it's doing to you.
That's right. And so I want to be, we've talked about this in other settings. Like, I want to be a man marked by humility and curiosity. And they're one of the kind of cognitive decisions I'm always making is, if one of my crew, not the world, I'm not the guy from South Carolina that doesn't like my podcast or doesn't like my sermons and wants to let me know all about it. I honestly don't care at all about what that guy thinks.
Right.
Like, it's not a hotel, bro. Just leave. Just stop listening. I didn't show up at your house.
That's right.
And plug my sermons in. Just stop.
Right.
And it's like, you don't have to tell me you're leaving.
You'll never be frustrated at me again.
You don't even have to do that at hotels anymore. You could just leave.
Yeah, best of luck to you.
You have to call down front. But in my head, if my crew, my guys, Trevor, Josh, Mason, or Nick, they come to me with hey, we want to talk to you about this, I'm going to assume they're right before I assume that I'm right. It's a cognitive decision. These four guys come to me and say, we've seen this a couple of times now, and we want to bring it up to you. I want to start with, they're probably right. Because I know me enough to know how my impulse is going to be to power up and defend myself. To power up and defend myself. I know that's what I do. And so I'm trying to always think, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to try to understand. I'm going to assume they're right. They're seeing it right before I defend myself.
And even if they're wrong, there's a net positive outcome of that situation, because your brother proved to you
that's right,
that he saw something that was on his heart. Yeah. It was a concern. Maybe the Holy Spirit gave him that word, and then he came to you and he brought that to you. Go ahead.
Courage. Yeah. That's the kind of courage I want around me.
Right. I mean, we live in a time where courage is apparently having a nose ring and blue hair, and it's like, oh, you're so courageous for being who you are, and it's like, well, or you're courageous whenever you actually go to a friend and risk something.
Yeah.
Part of my thing, and people have heard me rail on different kinds of hobbies, and people be like, well, you're just railing on it because you don't like it. But part of the thing why I think men don't effectively have foxholes or king's tables or whatever your ministry or your business wants to call it is because they're not doing difficult things together.
Yeah.
They're not doing hard things together. And so I talk about, Fight Club, which you showed up to on Sunday night. You were there on the back end when you got into town. So we're all guys that were reading a book. The books are typically challenging, and we come together and discuss it. And that's your tuition to get, free workouts in jiu-jitsu is you got to read the book and you have to participate in discussion. And then we do a workout, and the workout's typically not the easiest thing in the world, but it's not going to absolutely bury you. And then we do jiu-jitsu, and there are guys in there that when you showed up, there were two guys in there, first time they'd ever been on the mats in their entire life. Yep. And then there are guys that have been training for close to a couple of decades. And then
those guys look different, for the record. The two body types that were happening, those are different body types.
Yeah, there's certainly different body types. And jiu-jitsu's for every body type. It's for everybody, right? I saw a round the other day between I guess you're supposed to call him a little person, and a guy that had no legs. And they were going after each other. So jiu-jitsu is for everybody and every body. I will tell you that. But we do hard things together.
Yeah.
We get to the end of practice, and it's been a difficult thing mentally and physically to get to that situation. You have some guys that, they'll ruck together. They'll do CrossFit together. They'll work out together. They're doing hard stuff. But I feel like most men default to, all right, time to turn on, Fortnite or Call of Duty, and I'm going to put on my headphones and my friends that are spread out throughout the country or the world, and we're going to be on the same team on this video game.
Yeah.
Or the fantasy football thing, or let's go golf. And guys, yes, I don't want to golf. Don't ever invite me. I will tell you no. But if you want to go golf periodically, fine. Fine. That's what you're into. But you're not cultivating resilience by doing that. Yes, I know hitting that little white ball that doesn't move is difficult, but it's not a transferable skill to any other part of your life. Only benefits that come from golf happen on a golf course. Whereas if you do something like jiu-jitsu, the benefits go well beyond the mat, right? Because something that you learned training with me the last few days, you could use to protect yourself, to protect Lauren, to protect one of your 3 children, to protect one of your congregants, any number of things. It's transferable. Chipping onto the green from 100 yards away is not transferable to anything outside of golf. And so that's part of my problem and why I rail on some of these hobbies, some of which I enjoy and some of which I think are stupid and vapid. But it's like you have to do hard things with guys. Because when you get to the end of the hard thing and you realize you're all still standing, you've learned something about somebody. Yeah. Like even some of my guys that you've met, it's like there's a reason why I pointed out their belt rank to you. That guy's a blue belt. That guy's a purple belt. That guy's a brown belt, all that. Because just by telling you that, it's a cheat code to where you know something about that dude. So talk a little bit about that, because I can't stand it when guys just get together and do these just nonsense hobbies.
Yeah, I don't know. I've only played golf once my whole life, so whether it's transferable or not, I have no idea.
And your wife played her first round yesterday.
She did,
right?
And she was terrible. That's what she told me. That's no smoke. That's her saying,
everyone's terrible.
I am terrible. So I don't know about the hobbies that don't do the same thing that like martial arts, specifically jiu-jitsu, creates. But I do know that where we have had an annual rhythm, me and my crew, of getting up into the mountains and conquering a 14er over the last, 3, 4, 5 years. And so that's been one of our favorite kind of things to do together is get up there and carry, you're carrying your 50, 60 pound pack, we're cleaning up camp afterwards, setting up tent, we're going to push it. And it's always awful while we're doing it.
Right.
And always awesome when it's over.
Yep.
And so I do think, and that even like you're going to experience difficult things in life because we live in a fallen world, but there are ways you can choose to put yourself in difficult situations that make that day of war feel and seem a lot more manageable than it would if you've lived a real kind of cush, comfortable life. And then this thing that feels like it's crushing you now might not have felt like it's crushing you had you built up some resilience by doing things that your mind tells you shouldn't do because you could get hurt or you'll be sore, or you would rather doom scroll, or, maybe even throw in another hobby like video games or something.
Okay, so let's dig in that just a little bit more as well, because we've heard all the stats and we've heard all the anecdotes and about, men are lonely and testosterone levels have never been lower. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And, why are young men not even interested in getting married, interested in dating, interested in sex even? Part of it's because they can literally have sex with the most beautiful women in the world anytime they want to by just, sitting in front of their laptop and throwing their pants around their ankles.
Well, AI is going to help that. So.
Oh, yeah, certainly. It's going to,
in the Oculus.
Yeah, no kidding. And so many men don't even have a category for this in their own lives. And their entire life is about avoidance of pain and avoidance of discomfort. And they're also surrounded by people that are the exact same way. And guys that are wired like me, that are like, no, we need to be better. We need to be getting after it in a different way. We're seen as toxic. Yep. We're seen as damaging. We're seen as extreme. And certainly there are versions of that in this world as well. You can certainly go too far. Like, no one needs to train like David Goggins.
It's madness.
He's got some cool things, and if he's motivated you to get up today to run, but he can't go run for you. Cam Hanes can't go run for you. Jocko Willing can't do pull-ups for you. You have to create that own thing for yourself. But what is it about men? What can guys like me do with a show? What can people like you do with a microphone and, your sermons and your ministry and your books and things like that, to help get men to a place where they're okay to embrace this discomfort? And I'll use one example before you answer. So the guy that introduced me to you, Kyle Perkins, KP, the guy that I worked with, and he introduced me to your sermons back in the day. Well, the day he introduced me to you, he weighed about 320 pounds, right? Still a really good athlete, but severely overweight. Now he weighs less than I do. Now that's, I'm like, hey man, you need to eat some cheeseburgers. Like this is ridiculous. You're 6'3" and you weigh less than I do. But I wanted him to be healthy when we were good friends in college, but I don't get a vote.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure his family members were concerned about how much he weighed, but we didn't get a vote. But one day he decided no more. Yeah. Enough. I'm tired of being this big. I'm tired of the issues that I'm feeling of being this big in my 20s. And now he's created a life for himself, and he's showing an example to his wife and to his boys of a dad that's healthy, the dad that is health conscious and all these different things. But he decided to embrace the suck and lost well over 100 pounds. That's and crazy. Has kept it off and will keep it off. He will never be that big ever again. 0% chance. But so many guys just don't even have that wiring. They just don't want to go that way. And they're like, oh, well, you're an athlete and you're wired to be disciplined. I'm just different than you. It's like, no, I just made a choice, and I make the choice every single day. Yeah.
So what any given person can do, whether they're somebody like me with a mic or somebody like you with a mic, or maybe they don't have a mic, is embody and invite. And I think that's the rhythm. I want to embody living a certain way. And so like my congregation, my crew, my friends, they even know one of the main reasons I came up here is just get my butt kicked for 3 days. And they're like, how's that going to go for you? I was like, no, I'm going to get my butt kicked for that. Like, I know. And they're like, wait, you're
choosing this?
And you have already a super competitive gym here, but you're going up there. And I'm like, yeah, but it's what I will get there is different than what I'm getting here. And where I feel like I'm lacking in my game, I need this. And so I'm going to go do this. And so I've been texted the whole time I'm here by my crew going, how's it going? Are you sore? I'm like, oh my gosh, bro. Yes. Is it what you thought? I was like, it's been freaking awesome. But So I'm embodying that to them. And then I want to constantly invite guys in. Some of the ways you do it, like trying to get a couple of my guys to come and try jiu-jitsu. They're nervous about it. They're like I was. They're like, I'm going to get hurt. I'm too old. I mean, I wish I would. I wish I would have started it early on. Or I've got 2 guys right now. They're just like, man, I love the idea. And I'm like, well, you know what's right on the other side of this threshold?
The actual thing.
The thing.
It's there.
And I try to coach them like I was coached.
Yeah.
You just have to commit to getting your butt whipped for a couple of years. And it's okay. It's okay. It will be the most humbling, frustrating, beautiful ride of your life, because you'll start to hit stuff and you'll be like, I guess it's what golfers, when they hit that one shot in a crummy round, they're like, it brings you back. But I'm telling you, you hit a sweep on a higher belt, and I'm just like, that's fuel for months for me. And so embody and invite. So I want to be the kind of man in diet and in decision making. And then I want to invite others into that with me, come with me and see what this is all about. And let's again, the language that we're speaking right now, the language of my table. So it's not, I'd have to go back in time to go, how did we do this? Because we just do this now. We even kick around ideas of what would suck but be awesome for us to try to do. So for me, those guys who are closest to me, this is a normal conversation. How can we put ourselves in a uncomfortable position that on the backside of it's going to be freaking awesome? So even when I started elk hunting, the whole thing for me was like, I've heard this sucks.
Yeah.
I've heard this sucks. And it's awesome, but it sucks. So I don't want to blind hunt. I want to hike up into the mountains, knock down a 600-700 pound monster, and then figure out how to pack him out a couple of times at altitude. That's what I wanted. I didn't want an easy kill. And now I'm looking at getting a bow so I can make it even harder and make it suck even more and make it even more awesome. So the way we're talking here is like, this is the way we talk. And Mason King actually is one of the biggest drivers. He'll see something online and be like, this would be awful.
Let's do it.
That's it. That's the way we're trying to attack life together. Embody and invite. But now my table in particular, the fringe guys, not so much, but the guys on that table, they're just like, this would be terrible. We should do this. We should look at going here or taking a few days and trying this. And it's always stuff that while you're doing it, you're gonna be like, I hate everybody. I can't believe I said yes to this. I knew I would hate this. And then on the back end go, that might've been one of my favorite days I've ever had in my life.
Well, and you should be surrounded by dudes that are sending you that stuff. You can't be the center point. So I remember I saw somebody sent this to me on Instagram, but it was a 1 mile workout. Okay. So you're at a track. The first mile are burpee broad jumps. So basically you do a burpee broad jump. You do that for a quarter mile. And then you do a quarter mile of walking lunges, then a quarter mile of bear crawls, and then you run. And I then take that and I send it to one of my buddies and I'm like, we're doing this. It wasn't, hey, what do you think? Hey, is your schedule, do you think you're prepared for this? It's like, this is something that we're going to do in the very, very near future. You need to get your mind wrapped around it. And at the moment, like I was injured, torn ab muscle, cartilage all busted up. And so it's like, okay, I wouldn't have been able to do that without re-injuring myself. But it's like, yeah, we're just going to do that at some point, but you need guys to be able to send that to you. But by the magic of modern technology, we're going to be able to cut out this little break. But this Jocko Go has gone completely through my system. So I got to go.
You got to go.
I got to go tinkle. So I'll be right back.
Do it.
And whew, just like that, we are back. Maybe our editor can do some sort of like really cool transition, but let's talk a little bit more jiu-jitsu. So we've been kind of circling the wagons on it. So the first time you and I met was at Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu down at 5 down in the Dallas area. That's your home gym. That's where we meet. You spoke to the group. We got to roll a little bit. And then you were like, hey, I'm on sabbatical this summer. I want to come up and train with you. Yeah. And what it felt like when you said that was like when you tell someone, hey, you know what, we should grab lunch sometime. And you're both like, yeah.
The non-invite invite.
Yeah, and as soon as you leave, it's like, if you meant it, you would have pulled out your smartphones and, you found a time on the calendar to actually do that. So that's what I thought it was. Then I see you at the Acts 29 conference, and one of the first things you said to me is like, hey, I got my dates for sabbatical, ready to go. Like, I'm still ready to come up there. Like, let's find the dates. And I was like, is he serious? And then you just kept bringing it up. I'm like, I guess he's serious. So we figured it out, got it on the calendar. And so you've gotten some jiu-jitsu training in these last few days. So let's talk a little bit about that because, you just got your blue belt. So you still kind of feel like, a 5-stripe white belt. You feel like,
that's the word.
Everyone's going to know. But you're, going to a different gym is always weird because you don't know. Are we going to have a bunch of wrestlers there? Or is this the leg lock gym?
We're in Oklahoma, so we're going to have a lot of wrestlers.
Yeah, so down in Texas, y'all don't have as much wrestling. And, I've popped in places like in Utah and Louisiana and the places without a lot of wrestling. And it's just kind of laughable, the amount of guard pulling that's happening. And so so let's just talk a little bit about your experience at the Forge in Edmond, Oklahoma and kind of what you've seen. And we'll kick off the jiu-jitsu part of the combo.
Yeah, man, just incredible guys, like everybody I met. And this is where, we were having that conversation the other night about the kind of movements we're seeing among men. And I'm trying to discern, are we in the middle of or at the beginning of kind of a renewal movement among men? Or am I just in these environments now where there's a kind of masculinity that is, I think, biblical and beautiful? Is it because like 2.5 years ago, I just read the books and the data and I'm like, oh, men are soft and weak and cowardly. And then I get into jiu-jitsu and I'm just surrounded by guys who deeply love Jesus and could murder you.
Yep.
and won't, but they could. And then, as I've traveled and competed and got to know other guys, I'm like, man, there's this whole massive
world,
subculture
man.
of men who deeply love Jesus and are very capable of violence. And they're meek and they know the word of God and like JP Dental or, Big Isaac at my gym or Ryan Kramer, these guys that have these awakenings with the Lord. And it's just been really beautiful. So, coming up to the Forge, I don't know what to expect, but here it is again, just guys who love the Lord and are capable of violence or are learning to be more capable of violence. And it's a different, almost everybody pulls guard at double five. That's because Formiga is the wizard of butterfly, and he's gonna pull guard. And so there's probably a handful of wrestlers at double five, but not like up here. And so this is a bit of a different experience. And then the kind of training we're doing is always frustrating for me because I'm trying to find the physical mechanism that makes the move make sense to my brain. And I mean, you saw that ad nauseum yesterday where I'm growing in frustration because it's just a really simple move and I can't get my body to do it.
Right.
I mean, just over, and I guess that's why they say drillers are killers, right? Yep. I just have to drill that out of my system. But man, I think I'm going home beat up and happy, and that's why I came up here.
That was the goal.
I came to do this, as much of this or as little as this as you wanted to do, and then to train until I didn't want to train anymore. And that's what happened in the middle of our roll yesterday. I was like, I'm done, Kyle.
Right.
I'm done.
But there was still a couple minutes left on the clock.
There was.
And so what did I make you do?
You made me just keep.
Made you keep working.
Like, okay, just work. Just try to work. And I was like, no, I'm out of gas. I haven't had anything to eat today. We've been training for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
I think my foot is broke. And you're like, great, don't use that foot.
You don't need that stupid foot.
You don't need a hook on that side.
Right.
Just keep working your game.
So
it's awesome.
What's funny about that, so we drilled for about an hour and 15 minutes before class started.
Yeah.
Right. And so for a lot of people, like that's a long time to be doing jiu-jitsu because when we're doing drills, like.
And by we, he means I was drilling with him as my partner.
Right. Right. So it's like, but I'm not working terribly hard because you're the one having to do the move. And again, people just completely forget about this, even high level belts. When you're learning something new and you're like, man, I'm in good shape. Why am I exhausted? It's because your brain burns more calories than any other part of your body.
Well, that's what was happening.
And when you can't figure out the next move and when things are just going way too fast. But that was one of my things when you and I were drilling is I was like, Matt, slow down.
Yeah.
Like slow down because you would do it wrong. And then you would just keep like going fast. And I'm like, stop, think this, then this, then this. And then if you did it wrong, just the fact that you slowed down a little bit, you identified before you were even done.
I could feel that's off.
Yeah. Foot's not in the right place. Didn't pull right. I jumped. My head wasn't in the right position, those types of things. But when we got to our round, so we do an hour and 15 minutes of drilling. Then we do our warm up for class. And then we do the lesson
King of the
for
Ring.
class. Yeah. And then we do like, kind of more positional sparring. So it's
Which
like,
I got to go against Andy 3 or 4 times, so that was fun.
oh, well, and then you got Austin, our black belt.
No,
so he's
Austin
like, yeah,
is what
Austin.
I mean.
Yeah, so Austin Morris, our black belt, he's in his like early 20s. He's in
Possible Nephilim.
Yeah, he's in just tremendous physical shape, but mentally he's got it. Because there are guys that are in tremendous physical shape that are blue belts or purple belts that just, I mean, they're okay, but it's the physical attributes that make them good. Austin's biggest attribute isn't his height or his strength. It's his like razor sharp technique, but he's also got that dog in him. And no one got to see the dog yesterday, right?
God.
Like he was in pretty chill mode yesterday when he was doing that. But in the middle of our round, because we do 6-minute rounds for the most part at the Forge, and we're probably 3.5, 4 minutes in, and I think I'm in mount, and you go, God, I'm finished. And so I had a few options there.
Yeah. I
could just get off you and say, you know what, you're right. Let's just be weak, and let's just like stay here and let's just do nothing.
Wow.
But instead, I was like, okay, there's still some benefit that can be gained from this round. And so what I did is I took my effort from 80% down to 20%.
Did you?
And
that's a total flex on me.
That was not a flex.
He was like, you were exhausted and destroyed.
No.
And I was just like at 32%.
It was the first time I had rolled in 2 months because of the exploded rib. And so I was like, I'm not lighting it up today. We're not getting 80 cc rounds. And so it's like, hey, I'm going to do 75, 80%, just move around a little bit. But I downshift to first gear, 20, 25%. Now I'm coaching, because typically if people start asking me questions in the middle of rounds, I'll just be like, ask me after the round.
Yeah.
Like
I'm working.
Yeah. This is training time. Yeah. Like we had drilling time, question time is after, right? But at this moment I downshifted and it's like, hey, where am I heavy? Where am I heavy? Okay. Where do you need to have this foot? Hey, do you have any underhooks? Hey, and so we finished the round. You finished the last 2 minutes of the round.
I love that.
And you still got to work your brain, even though your body was telling you like, this isn't happening anymore. And then, and then you still get to have a good day of training. You leave, with some bumps and bruises, but non-injured.
Yep.
And you got pushed and expanded a little bit.
Absolutely.
And I mean, this does have a corollary to all the stuff that we've been talking about. To where it's like, where are the guys that are pushing you a little bit beyond where you need to be? Maybe you're just comfortable reading self-help books that are not challenging at all, that you can read in an afternoon. And then a guy drops, the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene in front of you and says, that's what we're digging into next. Yeah. Or Gates of Fire, which is not the easiest book to get through by Pressfield. And, just having those guys, that's again why I see like jiu-jitsu as a default mechanism and a divider for a lot of people, because you get filtered out pretty quickly in that. You got guys that come and train, they get one stripe on their white belt, and then they're just like, man, I can't see the end of this rainbow. Or the guys that get their blue belt and then they think, I'm good. I'll never get beat up in a fight. And then they get blue belt blues and then they never show back up. But I will say it's just so impressive for you to, at this later stage of your athletic life, like you're not 17, right? You're about to turn 50 here in a couple of weeks. And you're like, let's do murder yoga. Like, I know we talked about that when we were at your house, but I'm still blown away by it, because you're constantly getting your ego checked and you're constantly just having to deal with this just horrible thing every time you train.
Yep. Every time. There hasn't been. And then Formiga, because I'm 6'5", 215, Formiga will never feed me a white belt.
Nor should he ever.
It's always just like, Matt, Isaac, Matt, Blake, Matt. He just puts me with giant killers.
Yeah. That's
and
good.
then, but and here's what, if somebody's hearing me say that and go, oh, that's why I wouldn't want to train. The thing that I love most about the jiu-jitsu community is 99% of the higher belts are going to let a guy like me work.
Right.
If it's a 6-minute round, they're going to let me work for 4 minutes, and they're going to take that last 2 minutes and remind me, hey, I was letting you work.
And they're not going to try to hurt you.
No, ever. In fact, I'm far more in danger with a white belt 100%. Than I am a higher belt. Maybe some blues could be dangerous, but I've rolled now with enough white belts to know what panic feels like under my grips. And then even to be going, oh man, is this guy shifted? Do I just need to lay on this guy? Cause he is like, I can feel him getting angry.
Right.
And I never got angry because I got coached so well going in. Like, you're going to get smashed. It's not personal. It's, and then the higher belts, they do such a good job of letting me work or just going, you have no pressure, watch, bam, and just throwing me off. Keep pressure,
no
man.
pressure.
Yeah.
But the other cool thing about it is jiu-jitsu is one of the, I can't remember the guy's name. I need to submit it to memory. But there was a guy that was talking about jiu-jitsu. I didn't recognize him, so I don't really know his deal, but he was talking like he was an upper belt. And he goes, jiu-jitsu is one of those things that you can't just athlete out of.
Yeah.
And what he meant by that is everybody knows a guy that no matter what they tried, they were good at.
Yep.
First time they pick up a ping pong paddle, all of a sudden they're beating you. First time they pick up a disc, they're beating you in disc golf. Or every time that they pick up a skateboard, and his example was like, and then 30 minutes later they're kick flipping.
Yeah.
And it's like you can't roll down the sidewalk, and this guy's just never picked it up and he's kick flipping. Everybody knows that. Can't do that with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody do it.
You do not walk into a gym and then accidentally triangle somebody.
No.
You don't accidentally hit a blast up. Well, I guess blast double, you can just kind of be a goon and do that. But you don't accidentally hit an armbar. You don't accidentally hit a Kimura or an Americana or anything. None of those things happen by accident.
Yeah.
You have to come back to the mat. So there are times when I've been injured, which is right now, where I'm still going to class, I'm still dressing out, but I'm not doing anything. So I'm trying to work out my brain, but just working out your brain doesn't translate directly to the mat until you do it.
Yeah.
Same thing that if you're watching these videos, there's great videos like, for grapplers and things like that. And you can watch these things from guys like Gordon Ryan or John Danaher or Andre Galvao or whatever. But you can't just watch videos and get better at jiu-jitsu either.
Yeah.
You have to take what you're learning in your brain to the mat. Because the difference between me and Austin Morris in terms of our physicality, in terms of the amount we can deadlift or amount we can squat or the number of pull-ups we can do, we're in the same-ish category. He can outpace me in all of those, but we're close enough physically to where there's not just this huge disparity there. The disparity is in time on the mat and technique. And so that's the thing with jiu-jitsu is you can't get better without getting on the mat. And if you get on the mat, you're just going to get beat.
Yeah.
Because I'm 7 years into jiu-jitsu. I've got 4 stripes in my purple belt, which means I'm legitimately capable of protecting myself. And I'm working my way up to brown. And then eventually, as long as the body still works, will work my way on to black. But the thing is there are classes and there are weeks that'll go by where it just so happens to be the people that I'm rolling with, I've got a good game against their game, or I'm just more experienced. And then I run into the class where I look around, it's only hammers. And then by the end of class, I'm like, did I score today? I don't know that I scored. And I'm a takedown guy, so I can at least score 2 before, you sub me. But you're always going to run into those classes. Yeah. And that's why, guys, if you travel, take your no-gi stuff and take your gi with you, pop in somewhere. And your game that works in your little gym in Whereversville, Ohio, you go to somewhere else and it's like, oh no.
Yeah.
And then, but that's good for you because it helps kind of take you back to the gym, take you back to your technique and just kind of reels you back in.
Yeah. I think traveling with the gi has become one of my favorite things to do. One, it prepares me to fight strangers, which is really good for competition.
Yeah. Right.
So like, I'm not going to know anything about this guy's game when we lock up. So that kind of mimics it. And then I will get the points of emphasis in that gym. So whatever they emphasize in that gym, usually tied to whoever the black belt is that owns the gym,
right,
is going to be prevalent in their game. So they're gonna want to they've got a certain progression in side control, or they've got, and you'll begin to feel that if you get enough rounds in. But so I took my gi to Brazil with me.
Yeah, original double 5.
The original double 5 is in it's in Rio, and so brought my gi. Had through Formiga reached out to Tattoo, let him know I was coming, and then even my son came with me. So Reed and I brought our gis, and Felipe, who was our interpreter, started training about a year ago. He's a white belt, just did his first competition, came in second. Hey. So he's like, I'm coming. I was like, thank God, because I know Tattoo knows a little English, but I know I'm gonna need some help. And so the 3 of us went and dropped in, and it was so Brazilian. I mean, it just started whenever they decided to start, and it didn't end until no one wanted to roll. So, classes here is like, okay, it's time. 7:30, 35, we're over, let's
Bye. Get out.
Get out. We've got another class
Stretch
coming
at home.
in, or we need it. That's right. But they just kept, Tattoo Chest kept going, everybody good? Anybody want to go? Anyone would go? Of course, they all wanted the big white dumb American. So they would say something in Portuguese.
Super available.
Tattoo was like, do you have another role in you? And I was like, they were all much smaller than me.
Yeah.
And so much better than me. I mean, everything was so tight. I mean, I just remember rolling with this guy named Anderson. He's a black belt, a competitor. He deeply loves Jesus. And I've never rolled with anyone whose stuff was so tight. I mean, there was no space for anything. Now, it helped him that he's like 5'4".
Yeah.
That's a lot easier to kind of, keep
stay
space
compact. You are
when
compact.
you're fine. Like I'm not. I'm near hopeless trying to get space out with these long arms and legs, but loved it. And then I've loved being up here. And then I'm in, the beach next week with my family. I already found 2 spots and have a gi. I know I'm going to Whitefish later this summer. Already found the spot, already reached out, wanted to know when they train in the gi. And what's funny to me is the difference, like how many places are more no gi now than gi. Because I'm from a gym that the gi is where everybody is and the no gi is where some guys play around. Right. But you're from a gym where the no gi's huge.
Right. And it's kind of split down the middle.
Yeah.
There are guys, because how my schedule has worked out, I've been basically doing gi training almost exclusively for the last couple of years. And it's like, gosh, I got to work a no gi class into my schedule because you're right. Formiga loves guard, loves butterfly. We don't really do a lot of butterfly. Yeah. We don't have a lot of guys hitting butterfly sweeps. But then you go into a competition and all of a sudden you've got a guy with 2 butterfly hooks and you're like, oh crap, I don't know that I've ever seen this position. But same thing. I've rolled enough with the guys at my school. They know which takedowns I like and from which positions.
Absolutely.
And so I love to shoot an outside single because if I don't hit it, then I'm not in guillotine trouble. So I'm swinging to the outside, but I only do it to one side.
Yeah.
That's the side I'm most comfortable, most athletic and fastest doing. So they have to be heavy on their left leg. Their left leg has to be their lead leg and they have to be heavy on it. So a lot of these guys will not put their left leg in front of me, but they do also know that when their right leg lead, I love to shoot my double leg.
Yeah.
And so then they're moving around a lot to where like, okay, now he's thinking double, now he's thinking that. But in competition,
nobody has any
idea.
They
have no freaking clue.
No.
And so my outside single, I've hit in every single match that I've shot it because they're just heavy on their left leg. And it's like, all right, well, that's my left leg now.
Guess what?
But you do go to other schools that this is a leg lock school.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I don't really do leg locks. But so you did a private with my main instructor, which is Steve Jones. And, his style, you would think he weighs 250 pounds.
Yeah.
Because he's very slow and methodical. And there's nothing you can do to stop him. He's like lava that is slowly moving over your body. I call him creeping death. He likes Metallica. We both like Metallica, so I call him creeping death. And so, but that's what it's like rolling with him. And then you roll with other people that are super high flyer, athletic. They're doing crap that they saw on Instagram and all that. And then you have other people that just kind of have a lazy style or whatever. So you're learning different styles. But here's the thing about Steve is he had been a black belt for a couple of years. And then he just goes, man, I just don't feel like I know anything because when he was coming up, leg locks weren't really a thing.
Yeah.
The Danaher Death Squad hadn't, had their revolution in jiu-jitsu and we didn't have our Gordon Ryans and Craig Joneses and all those types of guys. And so I saw a meme the other day that perfectly encapsulated what Steve was going through and gave me a good reminder. So it had a white belt, a blue belt, a purple belt, a brown belt, and a black belt. It had the actual belts. And then it had words on top of it. White belt was like, I literally know nothing. Blue belt is like, I kind of know some stuff. Purple belt is, I'm getting there. I'm on the path. Brown belt was, I'm almost there. I'm almost to where I can understand this. And then black belt said, I literally know nothing. And it's like, wait, that doesn't make any sense until so shout out to John Millen with Origin. So I guess you can't work at Origin unless you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu. That's kind of the thing. Well, John just got his black belt here recently.
Okay.
He sent me a picture when I was down at Double Five in Texas of him with Formiga
at Origin camp.
No, this was way before that.
Okay.
This is before I think Origin was even a thing because John was a white belt.
Oh, wow.
And he had trained with Formiga. Formiga's a black belt. But I'm like, wait a minute. This picture was taken like, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. And so Formiga has been a black belt for longer than my man has been training.
Oh, no question.
But they're both black belts.
Yeah.
And so here you are. white belts are all kind of white belts that are your size, your age, are all kind of generally in the same degree.
Yep.
Black, blue, purple, brown. But then you get to black belt and it's like, oh no. There are dudes that have been black belts longer than I've been training. That's why Gordon Ryan disrupted the jiu-jitsu world so much, because he had been training for like 7 years and he was beating black belts that had been black belts for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing about jiu-jitsu, Matt, to where it's, you never arrive. And how many places in your life can you get to where you never arrive? The Bible's sitting right there by you. You never arrive at a full level of understanding. Regardless of how much he pretends like it, John MacArthur has not figured out all the questions there are to know about what's happening here in Scripture.
Be careful there.
Oh, whoops. Yeah, I know he's got some commentaries, but let's just pretend as if he doesn't like have everything figured out. The same thing, like if you get into reading literature, or if you get into something like jiu-jitsu, it is endless. Yeah. Like you don't ever want to find the bottom of it. And that's a great thing as you develop as well.
I think so. That's one of my favorite things about it is the mental challenge of it. And then how many different ways a scenario can go that I need to be prepared for in multiple directions. So the complexity, and this is going to sound, maybe it'll make sense to people. The complexity clears my mind.
Okay.
Because it's the only place, and I think I said this the last time we were having this conversation, but it's the only place I go where the only thing I'm thinking about is the thing.
That's all you can concentrate on.
There's no, and then that like scrubs the brain or something. It's like the number of times, I've been working through a text and I'm trying to get it, put it together in a way that I think is going to like land well with the people of the village church, or maybe I'm preaching at some event and I just feel stuck. It's not clicking. It's not, I got the exegesis, but putting the thing together is like, I'm struggling with it. And then go, let me set it down. Let me go train, and then go and train, and then come back home, and then in the shower, making sure I don't get staph infection. It just downloads.
Boom. Yep.
And it's happened enough now in that order that either as I'm driving home in the truck or once I'm showering when I get home, these complex things that I'm working on, whether it be a leadership challenge or exegetical application, just kind of clicks in my head. Afterwards, it's like, no, what I needed is to let my brain kind of turn off by turning on in a different direction.
Right.
And so that for me, I guess I've got friends who love to run. I hate to run. I'm never going to run. Part of why I'm doing jiu-jitsu is I can turn it. I don't want to run. I'm not
You want
running.
to go run after
We're just
this?
going to go do.
You want to go for a run?
You can if you want. You already broke my toe. So
that's okay.
So I think it does for me what running does for like Nick Crawford, who's going to go bust out 5 miles a day, every day, just so he can, think and be at peace with the world. I just need to put on some murder pajamas.
That's right. Fold people up in the clothes they're wearing.
Or even be folded up in the clothes that I'm wearing.
That's happening more frequently to me. It's blue belt. Get used to it. But here's the other thing about that, Matt, is you're absolutely right. If you're stressed out, if you're going through the valley of shadow of death, if you've got problems with your kids, if you go there and like, maybe if you're a really high level black belt rolling with a white belt, you can literally think about what you're having for dinner. You can think about what you missed out on work, whatever. But for the most part, it's like you're thinking about your game plan and their reactions and all that kind of stuff. But also, I've had this happen after class quite a bit. So you're exhausted, and there are days where I'll lift in the morning and then do jiu-jitsu in the evening. And so the number of calories burned in a day. And then in between that is doing an interview or prepping a podcast and all that. So I'm just like, basically it's a blur of burning calories all day long. I'll get into the truck. I'll take a deep breath and I'll just be like, man, I'm so thankful for my wife.
Yeah.
Like, golly, like she has to deal with this and I look like this and this is just who I am. And, she's here.
Yeah.
Or I'll be like, man, it's so cool seeing my boys grow up.
Yeah.
Or gosh, man, I'm glad my dad is like my biggest fan. No matter what I do, he's my biggest fan. And it's like our frenetic energy that we were talking about, that pace, like we typically don't have a category. Oh, I won't speak for you. I'll speak for me. I don't have a category for thankfulness really.
Yeah.
So Joby has helped me with that. He has like a thankfulness list.
Yeah.
And so every year,
journal.
gratitude list on his phone. And he has to have one thing for every year he's been alive. And so I started to do that. And so sometimes when I kind of forget to be grateful, I'll go back to my list and be like, oh yeah, like I am super thankful for these things. And they're not all created equal because I have like my sons, and then I also have UFC nights. Like I'm very grateful for both things, but just to a different degree. Sure. But Matt, that's been super helpful for me. Just, and I've said this before, I feel like with guys, let me go back even one more step. So I've restarted 3 times here. Originally, Undaunted.Life was going to be an excursion ministry.
Okay.
Meaning, and I did this with a crew of guys, a bunch of who you met over the last several days. And I took them into the woods and I basically beat them up for 3 days. And I was like, the concept, and I still believe the concept is a lot of guys, you can't get into their mental state or their psyche until you break them down a little bit and exhaust them physically. Same is true. Am I boring you with my thing? Like we've been lighting it up the last few days. Same thing on the mental side. You can't get to their spiritual psyche until they're a little bit exhausted mentally. And so that was what the weekend was. This is about spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. We're going to make it the hardest weekend possible. And we got more rain in that 2-day period than we did for the rest of the year.
So that made it even better.
Yeah, and so there was like standing water in all of our tents and things like that. And so I truly do feel that way about men's ministry and the approach. But for a lot of guys, and for me individually, I can't get to those places of thankfulness sometimes until I'm so exhausted that there's no other emotion to be felt. Or it's that pause between turning the truck on and the podcast hasn't started yet, where I have that little bit of stasis and quiet. And I mean, we just don't look for that quiet nearly as often in modernity either. Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right. And that was, going all the way back to the beginning. I think one of the themes of my sabbatical is how can I tap into that stasis a bit more often while keeping those parts of how God built me for my joy and his glory. Cause I love going hard. I mean, I don't. Yeah. So trying to find that moment and cultivate it and what benefit that might bring to every aspect of my life, including judo. I mean, you were talking about, that it was happening while we were drilling. I was just like frenetically inside, like, let's get it right. Let's get it right. Let's get it right. And you're just like, hey, breathe, bro. Just breathe for a second. Usa. And so that's where what you're describing is what I'm trying to develop, which is going to be hard for me. It will be a challenge for me because it's not my natural bent I will have to remind myself. I will have to create rhythms. I will have to just breathe for a second.
So, okay. So all cards on the table. One of my biggest struggles, and really ultimately what I get from a lot of guys, is prayer life. Yeah. They don't really get it. They don't really know how to do it. Yeah. It's not really talked about, really. Like when you listen to certain pastors, like, they talk about like, hey, this is something you should do, but there's not really like almost like a step-by-step program. Yeah. And so a lot of guys, Matt, actually will not even mention it to anybody because they think that there's something broken in them because they don't really pray. But for me, because of my frenetic drive, because I want to accomplish, because I want to do things, I walk around with my AirPods in my pocket. Because if I'm getting my oil changed and I'm going to be sitting for 30 minutes, I listen to everything at 2 times speed. So that's an hour's worth of content that I can get in. I listen to podcasts while I'm working out. I listen to podcasts while I'm walking the dog, while I'm doing the dishes, while I'm doing the kids' dinner, while they're watching cartoons or whatever those things are. And so I have crowded out basically
all the time to pray,
the time to just sit and listen, the time to just exist. I'll be sitting in a blind during whitetail season, and I got podcasts going and I've got books going and all that. And so it's not until I go out to encounter with Joby out with the guys out with Church 1122 to where it's like, no, like here's your devotional material for this morning while you're waiting for something to come out that's, good enough to shoot. And that is a lot of guys. Like they're not listening to podcasts or audiobooks because they're trying to prepare an interview or prepare to sound smart on a show. They're just doing it because it's interesting to them. Yeah. Or they're listening to music because it's interesting, or they've got Netflix on because it's interesting, or the ball game or whatever. And it's one of the worst things about me because I'll say there was one guy who specifically said something that I thought was very interesting. He trains out with the Fieldcraft guys out in Utah. And he was like, man, for forever, I felt like God talked to me all the time. Yeah. And for the last 6 months, I feel like I haven't heard him at all. I said, tell me about the last 6 months. Tell me about what you've been doing. And what he went on to describe is got a different job at work, required him to work a little bit more. It's more difficult mentally, had some struggles at home, was having some parenting issues, and was just doing all these different things. And then, so he's describing the big kind of core things, but I'm like, what do you do in your off time? So he does jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And so, it's hard to pray when you're in the middle of a round as a white belt. And then he's just describing all these things. And then I just asked him a question. I was like, is it possible God is still talking to you, but you've created so much noise that you can't hear him?
Yeah.
Maybe he's talking in the same level of voice, and it hasn't landed with you yet. And he just goes, oh my gosh, I think you're right. And I had known this guy for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I just asked him a question that I didn't know the answer to. Yeah. I was like, is this a possibility? And he immediately was like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what I need to do. But for us, and I know it's got to be frustrating for you as a pastor to see so clearly what people are doing wrong, and just to also equally see their unwillingness to make any changes whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the call. I mean, that's I think what you just described is ministry, that you're shepherding people towards the truth and the application of truth. Because Jesus in the Great Commission basically says, hey, teach them to observe all that I commanded.
Yeah.
He doesn't say teach them all that I commanded. He said teach them to observe it. So what does it look like to obey Jesus is always the question. Not what does Jesus teach, but what does it look like to obey the teachings of Jesus? That's and that's progressive sanctification. So you've got, like in my case, thousands of people sitting out there who are in various stages of maturity, all like moving in this direction of observing the commands of Jesus in their lives. And all the complexities of those backstories and present realities, and whether there's addiction and abuse in the background, or whether they grew up in church, all the days of their life, and, don't cuss and don't drink and, don't do any of the bad things that you're not supposed to do. And they're going to each have various challenges in their sanctification. And so this is what I love about the Holy Spirit. I can say, there's a lot I love about the Holy Spirit, but like I can say one thing. That's what I'm doing in a sermon. I've got this is what I want them to leave with.
Right.
Right? It's just a basic, it's where I start. What's this text saying? This text is saying this. I want the men and women who hear me this weekend to leave with this applied. And that's just kind of how my brain works when I'm writing a sermon. So there's a single thing I'm trying to get across, not 3 things, there's a thing. But the Holy Spirit will take that and say 4,000 things. He'll speak to the addict, he'll speak to the cold marriage, he'll speak to the guy in financial distress, he will, and so the Spirit's always doing the heavy lifting in pastoring and preaching. I've always, like, the Word does the work. I believe that the Word. I need to be faithful to the Word. The Spirit's got to do what the Spirit says He does, or none of this is going to work. And so that's had to be my approach, because I don't know how you, like, even as I think about Paul's command in Thessalonians, where he says, warn those who are idle, encourage the timid, something with the weak, and be patient with all men. I'm like, how am I supposed to do that in a single sermon? Well, I can't.
All those boxes, let's check them.
I can't. And so, but the Spirit can. And so I've got to trust, one, that He who began the good work will be faithful to complete it at the coming of the Lord Jesus. So we've got lifelong work happening here. Nobody's going to get there. And then I know that in different seasons, different people are going to be enduring different things. There's the valley and the desert are very real places. And sometimes people put themselves there, and sometimes the Lord led people there, but it's a real thing. And then the mountaintop's a very real thing. There are seasons of my life I was just like, man, I know this season will end. I wish it wouldn't.
Yeah.
And
we're trying to build tents up there to hang out.
That's right. And I'm in one right now. I'm in a sweet season right now. 2 years ago, rough year, the 5 years before that, brutal. And so I'm like in this little season of peace right now. And I'm just like,
what's going to happen?
Oh God, thank thank you for this. And we had asked, Lauren and I had specifically asked, we were just so weary. We need a season of peace, Lord. You know what we can handle, what we can't. We feel like we can't handle much more than where you've got us. And he's been faithful to just been with the kids, with our marriage, with the church, with other things. It's just been a good season of peace. I'm so grateful for it.
Well, when we were talking in your office, we talked about how I kind of noticed a couple of years ago, maybe you were mailing it in a little bit, or 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and how that had all changed. So guys, you can go back and listen to our previous discussion about that. But the thing I'm curious about for you is everyone has to fight stagnation and becoming stale and, just kind of doing the same thing. But it's funny when I've mentioned, because people are like, why is Chandler up here? I was like, well, for the 20-year anniversary of him being at the Village Church, they gave him, a couple months off, to do whatever the heck he wanted to do. And he wanted to train jiu-jitsu as much as possible. Right.
Yeah.
And it immediately, it was interesting because I never really thought about it, but I had multiple guys be like, so do churches kind of do that? Is that like an annual thing that they give people sabbatical? And I'm like, interestingly enough, I happen to know, because I've, talking with Tom Rayner and some of the things that he knows about burnout, a lot of churches don't do sabbaticals
ever
at all.
Yeah.
And so you might get a long weekend. You might get a weekend or two off a year where you don't have to prepare a sermon and preach, and you kind of let the youth guy do the sermon this week.
Memorial Day.
Yeah. You kind of do all this. Yeah. You kind of
January. The other one's January something, like the last Sunday in January is always, or the first Sunday in January. It's that one that falls around New Year's after Christmas. There's that's youth pastor.
It's the in-between one.
National Preaching Day.
Yeah, where no one really cares what's being said from the pulpit. And so I say that tongue-in-cheek, obviously, for those of you that aren't used to my humor by now. But for you, obviously, you've gone through several seasons. You've had tremendous highs and lows as parts of your ministry. Some of those have been elucidated in the news, in headlines and things like that. But for you, how do you continue to, I'll say you collectively as TVC, how do you continue to support yourself? How does TVC continue to support you? For those that are in ministry listening to this, of which I know there are a lot, how can the elders support the pastor? How can the pastor, support the sheep in a way to where it leads to this long-term success? Because honestly, you don't really see these super long tenured pastors anymore. There's just an absolute deluge of guys that used to be in ministry that are now selling insurance or driving for UPS, and nothing wrong with those. Those are good livings that you can make, but they ran right into the teeth of burnout, and they just got chewed up and spit out.
Yeah, so I think each place is going to be unique. We offer sabbatical to our guys and gals every 5 years. Once you've been at the church for a period of time, every 5 years you get, we have a group that this is their 5th year. So I'm not the only one on sabbatical this summer. There are 2 other people that will head into sabbatical. Theirs isn't as long as mine. The thing that made the 20-year special was the length of the sabbatical. I was due a sabbatical anyway, but they basically added a month and a half to it as part of my 20-year. And so I think things like sabbatical are important. I think maybe what's most important, and it's not always the church who's at fault for this. Sometimes it's the guy that's at fault for this. I am exceptionally gifted at 3 things. I am better than most without trying. And then, man, I'm just average to below average at almost everything else. It's just the truth. If Lauren were here, she'd be like, it's not true. But then if we just turned to her and started asking follow-up questions, okay, tell me about this. Well, he's okay. If he was doing steak or salmon on the grill, he's amazing. Right. Not his ribs are.
Yeah, you're not making chicken marsala.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Or, you could just ask her, yeah. But she would be quick to be like, no, baby, you're not. Best. It's not just 3. It's not just 3, babe. And so where I've had the slow, patient courage to act was to find high capacity leaders and take the power that was given to me when I was hired and break it up and hand it to other guys who could, what I can do with preaching and spiritual leadership and things like that, they can do with organization. They can just do it without it's just so easy to them. They just see it. It's not like I could do some of the stuff they do and work my butt off, and it's going to be a B-.
Sure.
They won't hardly try, and it's an A+.
Yeah.
But then they do try, so it's exceptional. And so I knew I need to find guys who can let me grow in my gifts and use my gifts, leverage them for the kingdom in like kind of a maximum way, which means I'm going to have to find guys I trust who are going to be with me on this journey and have all the authority they need to do what I need them to do. And so Josh Patterson was the first one of those, where I approached him and I said, I think you should be the lead pastor of this church and I should be the teaching pastor of this church. And Josh said, no way I'm doing that. And he said, without your voice in certain rooms, nothing would ever get done. Plus, I think you've got a pronounced leadership gift. So I know you're just happiest when you're preaching, but I think if you pulled out of directional spiritual leadership here, you would wake up and you'd hate the church. You'd wake up and you'd be really pissed at all of us when we were just kind of doing what you told us to do, but you weren't involved anymore in how those decisions were made and how they were being executed. And so I think it's a terrible idea. It's like, okay, well, there we go.
Yeah.
And then
what was his role at the time when you had this conversation?
Exec pastor.
Okay.
He was the exec pastor. And he had been the college singles pastor before that when 90% of the church was college and singles.
Right.
So he he basically was running discipleship at the village
Right.
for a long time. And then close to the time I got diagnosed with cancer, we were reorging and I was pressing again to not be king. And so we were curious at whether or not we could have two lead pastors. So not make me teaching pastor and Josh lead pastor, but could we both be lead pastors with different emphasis, with intentional overlap, and then really it would be Jesus as the head, the elders, the lead pastors, and then the exec team. Is that something we could do? And as we started wrestling through that, we figured, what would be awesome is if we brought Brian Miller on, who was he was chairman of the elder board at the time. He's buying and selling hospitals, but a brilliant organizational mind whom I'd been walking with for 10 years. So had a lot of trust in. And we thought, why don't we just make it 3 lead pastors and give Brian operations and just let him run it? And so we were in that conversation when I had a seizure on Thanksgiving morning in 2009. So nothing was set, nothing had been brought to the elders, nothing was. And I think me going down and nobody knowing when I was coming back at the time was really utilized by the Lord to kind of move us into this model. Because if ever you get a living, breathing, oh no, what happens if he's gone? We were in it.
Yeah.
And so
it's not theoretical anymore at that point.
No, it's not theoretically. Yep. And so Brian became, here's who Brian was. Brian became like my right hand in that season. So he and Lauren were the only 2 people on earth who knew what my prognosis was before I did. Like the doc told Lauren, and then Lauren told Brian, brought Brian in, and then didn't tell anyone else because she didn't think it would be fair to me. So they were carrying the weight of knowing, oh man, he's probably got 2 to 3 years to live before I have any idea of what they found in my head or what next steps were or what. And so Brian's that guy for us. He was the one that helped, like more so than my family, more so than Lauren's family. He was making sure things were okay for us. And I mean, I'll love him forever for that. How he supported my wife in that season, how he made sure my kids were okay in that season. And he just, I'll love him forever for that, owe him forever for that. And so I start getting good news, not bad news, and we revisit this plan. And it makes more sense to all of us that we should move into this. And so the 3 LP model was born at the Village Church.
Okay, so a couple things immediately come to mind. One is the Office episode where they were made co-managers. So you have Michael Scott is a co-manager with Pam and Jim. So Jim was co-manager at the time, and how that was kind of ridiculous and wasn't going to work. And, you know, I guess the pitch is, okay, Jim's going to handle the day-to-day and Michael Scott somehow is going to handle like the higher level, like, you know, strategery of everything. So that comes to mind. The other thing that comes to mind is, well, TVC is a pretty sizable church.
Yeah.
You know, you don't exactly have budgetary issues or concerns. And so the thing that I think about is, okay, what about the ministries that aren't very big? Yeah. What about the congregations that are a couple hundred people as opposed to a couple thousand people? And you're the lead pastor, but there is nowhere in the budget to hire an executive pastor or a pastor to handle this, or someone who's the organizer person, or someone who loves counseling. Cause like some people are just like, I'm a great speaker, but you don't want me in marriage counseling kind of a situation. So what do the churches do to where it's like, okay, the roles aren't differentiated enough to where we're not going to be stepping on each other's toes, or look, we just don't have the capacity to add anybody.
Yeah. So the way churches historically have handled the resource question is usually through committees. And so like even when I came on at the Village, which was Highland Village First Baptist Church at the time, I came through a personnel committee. I didn't come through an elder board or a deacon board. There was a personnel committee made up of subject matter experts from the church who had experience in personnel issues that are who I come through. And the search team or the search committee was who found me and brought me to the personnel committee when they wanted to offer me the job. And then there was the finance committee, and there was the way churches—
Is it a lot of volunteers normally how they do that?
They are lay people with subject matter expertise who are looking to serve their church with their subject matter expertise. And so that, I think that's a way that's the historic way churches have solved this issue when they're below the 300 mark or at the 300 mark. Because usually by the time you hit 300 to 500, you've got it's kind of a sweet spot. You're going to make a couple hires at that moment, and you should be hiring to your weakness. I would argue. I would say always hire to your weakness. So if you're a bad organizational leader, you need to hire a good organizational leader. And if you're like your weakness is maybe in some other way, I'm hiring my weaknesses. That's what I was doing constantly in the early days. I wanted guys who could teach and guys who were flanking my weaknesses as I understood them at the time. And it's worked. I mean, it's worked. So that's the way most guys do it. Another way would be to create, if you're a pastor, this would be similar, but it was what I tried to do when I first got there is I created what I just called the Lion's Den. And it was a group of men that I handpicked to meet with me Wednesday night after prayer meeting. And they didn't have any real authority but they were all super gifted. And I just wanted to bounce things off of them and recruit their help. So what I was asking them for is their skills brought to bear on this very fast growing congregation. And what I was offering them is the inner circle. What I can give you, I don't have money,
right? But
you've got my ear. I can't offer you money, but I'm going to tell you where I'm trying to go and recruit your help to get there. So that was a method I chose early on when we were broke. And but those are the two ways I think churches historically that are smaller have utilized the committee approach and leveraged committees to get those things done that maybe the pastor, it's a little too much to do it all for that guy.
And I think part of it as well is as a pastor, at a certain point, you've got to kind of let go of some of the things, because I know in my personality, like my better is better than your better. And so if I let you try and do this, it's just not going to be as good as I'm going to do it. So I'm just going to do it. Right. Yeah. So that's wrong.
Yeah. Because then you'll start resenting that guy.
Right.
But you're like, you should be doing not me. And you're like, well, I'm not letting him.
Right. And so like you kind of have to open your hands at some point, but let the main things be the main things and do the things that only you are going to have to do. Because, in Hebrews it talks about how basically pastors are going to have to give an account someday for how they shepherded their flock. That's a terrifying thought if you're working in pastoral ministry, because guess what? I'm not going to have to give an account for how I've, shepherded podcast listeners.
Yeah.
Right. And so, because it's not the same thing, I haven't been given that role. Like, you may see me as, pastor, but I'm at best pastor light. You know what I mean? Like, that's essentially what I'm doing. It's like, I'm going more for the prophet side, for speaking, actual truth to power, for being able to equip men to be able to push back darkness. So, as we wind to a close here, because I can hear both of our tummies rumbling, I think it's about time for chicken wings. By the time this comes out, The Overcomers will have been out for a couple of months, a few months, something like that. And so obviously everybody is writing books about Revelation for large Christian publishers. Like, that's a super common thing that happens. But when we talked the first time, it wasn't out yet.
Yeah.
And so you have all this anticipation. You write the book, you spend time, you're editing, you're kind of keeping it all together. You're also doing the ministry, and you wrote every jot and tittle of that book. There's not some, guy, typing away in some corner that's, this nameless, faceless person. We can still try to find that person for you. But you give so much effort to this thing, and then it's out there.
Yeah.
And so it's out there now. You've had a couple of months of people that have read it, reviewed it, loved it, hated it, somewhere in between. And so how have you felt like The Overcomers has landed with the marketplace? Are you pleased with where it is right now? Like, how do you feel about that whole thing?
Yeah, we were talking about this in the truck. I don't, because this is my first book with like a major publisher, right? That, I've done like Lifeway, Crossway, I've done David C. Cook, Good Book Company. Those are all great publishing houses, but they're really small compared to the engine of HarperCollins. Yeah. So like, I've never done pre-sales for a book before, but we pre-saled this one. And I just don't know how to measure anything right now with them. I know it's already in its first month sold more than my last book did.
Yeah.
And it's been out for 6 years. So I've been super pleased with how it's landing. I know the book frustrates the dispensationalists, and so they're starting to show up more and more and more with some outrage and character assassination of me, but it's fine. That's
awesome.
I'm not happy if somebody's not frustrated with me, but man, I've loved it. I love the process. I've already started outlining another book, and it's the writing it that makes me tired, not the dreaming of it.
You just had a moment where the writing of it, just thinking about the writing of it, was making you tired. But I always like doing this to people that have released either like a lot of books or a lot of albums or something like that. And, your buddies in Shane, I put them to this. I was like, all right, you get to leave one album for humanity, right? So of all the albums you've written, what is the one album that you leave for humanity that humanity gets to, and everything else is deleted in your catalog? So for you, this is book 9, right? 8 or 9. Okay. At this moment right now,
Explicit Gospel.
Okay, why? That's the one that I would put, right?
Yeah,
it's on the 100 books list. Like,
I think,
and that was your first book.
It's my first book. I think the thing that beats in my soul is the message of the Explicit Gospel. Like, if you ask me to come preach for you and you don't give me a topic, you're getting Explicit Gospel.
Okay.
If you get me in a conversation, and I've still got air and, ground and air as categories I use. What I wish I didn't put in the book that maybe I'll go back to Crossway and go, I'd love to update that and put it back out, is, man, I left out the resurrection, man. How do I leave out the resurrection talking about the gospel?
Yeah.
Like, it's not the gospel if he isn't raised, and all the implications of resurrection and ascension. So I'd love to maybe go back and look at it and tweak it and make it a little bit stronger in some areas that, looking back 15 years now, I would do a little bit different. But man, I loved that writing that book was so fun.
Okay, so the interesting thing about that is, I forget what Everett said, but Shane Bernard, I asked him, like, if you could leave one song, and Everett goes, I already know what Shane's going to say. And it's like, it's whatever the latest one he wrote is, right? That's the song that's most important to him, and all those types of things. So it's interesting that it's the one you come out of the gate with, because that's always the concern, is your first album is the banger.
Yeah.
And then you just release a bunch of albums that do okay.
Yeah.
But when you're at a concert, no one wants to hear the new stuff. They want to hear stuff off the first album. And so, have you been chasing the Explicit Gospel this entire time with new books? Or?
But here's what's interesting. I don't want to write unless I have something to say. I'm not writing books to write books. I'm writing books when the Lord puts something in me that I'm like, I want
Gotta get this out
to live a long time, and I want it to go as far as it can go. But so I would say Explicit Gospel, but I'm probably more proud of The Overcomers than the Explicit Gospel.
In what way?
Well, I wrote Explicit Gospel with Jared Wilson So that was me working with someone to write a book, where the Overcomers, that was just me.
Yeah.
It was just me and the Lord and the scriptures and the commentaries and the wrestle and the
word processor.
and the
It's
word.
right
Yeah,
there.
that's right. And Word, that because you have to write, at least with the publisher I'm with, you write in Word, not Google Docs.
Okay.
So, which I do everything in Google Docs.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to put Word on my computer to write this, but I was like, Andrea, can you put Word on my computer?
Is it Word still a thing? Can we put that on this computer, please?
Can't get through our security system to put a
right.
Yeah. So will you put Word on my computer, please? So yeah, I think I'm super proud of the Overcomers because it was all me. There wasn't any, and I wrote it differently. I put a little card on my monitor that just said, like you're having a cup of coffee, because I didn't want to shift back into my preaching voice. I wanted it to be like you and I were, we're sitting around and we were talking about these things, and I'm leaning in on, and I said early in the book, I wish we could do that because I might be softer in some areas or harder than others. But since we're not having a cup of coffee in this book, I'm just going to say it to you. And so I think the book reads that way.
It does.
That we're hanging out and I'm trying to help you have some freaking courage for this moment that we're in.
So is that the voice that you're going to be carrying into all books, or was it just the
That's a great question, Kyle. I don't know if I've thought about it that way. I think what I'm curious about is the readability of the book across the broad evangelical spectrum. Because some of the critique, one of the critiques of Explicit Gospel is that it was really hard for a lot of kind of normal evangelicals to understand what in the world I was talking about, which for a guy like me, I'm just like, wait, what?
How? Yeah.
Wait, what? But I forget, I've been preaching a kind of way to a church for, 23 years. So there's a whole vernacular that I have that and then the network that I help lead is a theologically aligned, driven network. So theological terms and ideas are just part of what I know and do. I didn't realize that more broadly, evangelically speaking, they don't understand those terms. And I am taking for granted that they know things and so I likened it to, I was reading a sociological book, and I found myself getting frustrated with it because it would use a term that had a whole school of thought behind it, but I didn't understand the term.
Right.
And so I could make two choices. One, I'm going to read this book for the next decade, or I just need to read and hope that the
context,
get the
high points, yeah.
Over time that I pick up on the context, and then don't think you're smart about this word because it's probably much more that you don't get around it. And so I'm trying to write where I'm not doing that to evangelicals, but I'm not coming all the way down to where, there's crayons involved. And so I don't know how I'm going to judge whether or not we hit that sweet spot, but I'm trying to figure it out, who's buying the book, all that stuff's being tracked, and we'll learn from there.
Well, and part of the thing is when you read a book by Carl Trueman, you don't want to hear him in his casual voice.
No,
right?
I don't.
Now, I will say when I'm about a quarter of the way into a Carl Trueman book, it's I wish he explained this using crayons.
Just sit down.
Yeah.
It's so true.
And because I even said it last time and people were kind of giving me crap, but when I was talking to Carl Trueman about his latest book about creeds and confessions, I was like, every time I read your book, it's every page is thicker than a Snickers. And it's just because it's a 200-page book that's going to take me a month and a half to read, just because it's okay, you have to go. So you can't read Shakespeare fast. You can't read, a lot of these things fast. And so for me, I find books that are more casual are easier to skim, which depending upon where I'm at in life, it's okay, I can kind of get a sense. So there are books so Gary Thomas writes a lot of relationship books. Well, I don't care about anecdotes at all. I care about when I'm reading a nonfiction book, I care about the narrative arc of the thesis of what you're trying to get across to the audience.
You are very much an outlier in that reality.
Right, whereas everyone else is focused on the anecdote.
They'll put the book down if they're not there.
Right. And so for me, and the thing is you always get better. I had someone mention to me the other day, and they meant it as a compliment. By the time I was kind of embarrassed by it, but they were like, "Oh yeah, when I listened to your old podcast, you're way better now." And I was like, I thought I was good then too.
I was killing it back then, bro.
And so, but he's like, no, like, because I think he can kind of sense I was like, I don't know how to take that. But he was like, no, like your questions are crisper and you get to the point like where you want to go better. And it seems like you're kind of bringing people along the interview even more effectively than you did. But part of it is my prep has gotten better too.
Yeah.
Because I prepare the same amount of time-wise early on for early episodes as I do today. Same amount of effort, with a large audience versus basically a non-existent audience. But whenever I'm looking at a book and it's like, okay, the interview is in 2 weeks, I've got to have my questions ready to go. It's like, I can't go onto every rabbit trail and dig down into everything and then, check it with the cross references in the back and the bibliography. I can't do that. I've got to get the point of the book because my duty is to God first and then to my audience. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, if you're not going to read the book by Carl Trueman, you still need to get a nugget out of this interview that you can take and apply to your life and to your family and to your business or something like that. And so when you have a book with a lot of anecdotes in it, I can get the point without the anecdote. Yeah. But there are chapters where I'm like, I have no idea what the author's trying to communicate to me here. Hopefully these anecdotes help me. Yeah. And then, so I kind of approach it different places, but part of it is what you're going to. If you go to C.S. Lewis and you're like, I'm going to do a casual read, you can't casually read Screw Tape Letters. No. It just doesn't happen. No. So can you give us any hints on what the next book is going to be about, or is that going to violate your contract?
No.
Because it's just me and you talking. No one else is listening.
What I hope it's about, I want to write a grimy book on sanctification.
All right.
That sanctification isn't up and to the right. It's more circular and repetitive, which means we have to, for whatever reason, we have to learn the same lessons over and over and over again in different seasons and different times. And that it's not like the spiritual life, the long journey home. That's what I hope to call it, is there are epic peaks and painful valleys, and that means you're on the path. And I find this the more modern idea of just like always happy, everything going your way, the blessed life.
Your best life now?
I left that part. I was giving that to you. It was
you're
a
welcome.
softball. You're welcome. I threw it up for you. Yeah, I knew
Sounds
you would
good.
swing.
Wha-pow.
I want to write honestly about how hard it can be to follow Jesus sometimes. And that hard to follow Jesus in this season is more normal than people think it is. And that Jesus is more present in those moments than you could imagine. And so my ideas be to just kind of walk through the Beatitudes, because the Beatitudes, Jesus didn't come to find these people, he came to make them. So the whole blessed are yous, nobody's that.
Right.
But Christ is coming in and going, this is what I'm going to make you. And it's going to take our whole life, and it's going to take some significant spiritual surgery. And some of that surgery is going to be really painful, and some of that surgery you won't even know I did. But I'm going to get you there. I swore by my own name that I would keep you. That's Hebrews. I began the good work. You didn't begin the good work. I mean, I know you think, for the Calvinists listening, we know that he began the good work.
That's right. Got to check that box.
Not some of you other
You didn't
suckers.
do anything.
That's right. And he'll be faithful to complete it unto the day of the Lord. So when's it completed? At the return of Christ or your death, which means that when you're 70, you're still being sanctified.
Right.
When you're 98, you're still being sanctified until you're dead or Christ returns. We are people in process. And I think to see ourselves that way, and God help us see other people that way, can create some really beautiful things. And so that I'm kind of got that itch right now. That's what I'm kind of chomping at the bit to dive into.
And so timeline for a second release with HarperCollins?
Well,
anything?
I don't think we've got a hard date on it yet. I have to get this approved, and then I'll start writing. And then it's a year-long process to write, edit, and roll out a book. So probably 2 years from now, year and a half from now.
Well, and the good thing about just recently on the Fortune Table, we went through Psalm 23, probably the most popular of all the Psalms. Yeah. And isn't it so interesting that you can read Psalm 23 100 times? You can, see the artwork on the church wall with, a deer that doesn't look exhausted, which is not the point of Psalm 23. And you don't understand how beautiful the psalm is until you yourself are walking through the valley of the shadow of death.
Yeah.
Or until someone you love is walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And you miss parts of that psalm, like the part where God doesn't leave you there.
Yeah.
And also God's going to allow you to go through that.
That's right.
God's job is not to protect you from anything.
I will be with you.
Will be with you.
That's right.
Where? Not in, the land of rainbows and unicorns and pixie dust, but when you're in the muck, when you're in the valley of the shadow of the death. So inherent is that in that is the guarantee that if you live long enough, you will be in the valley.
No question.
And it probably won't be one time, and it probably won't be a short time.
That's right.
But he's there with you. That's the promise.
That's right.
And so it's like if you sing better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere, where that one day in the court, you might be in the valley of shadow of death, but guess what? It is better that he is there with you.
That's
so, Matt, I'm so glad that you were able to come up and spend some time over the last few days, but I'm pretty certain it is chicken wing o'clock at this point. So should we cut this off?
Let's do it.
All right, brother. Until next time.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.